Okay, these are quotes from my book, Holy Grail of Wisdom Quotes, Pete Rogers. Okay, so we're starting out now. We're just going in alphabetical order, so now we're on Beethoven. I got some historical information about Beethoven. I'm not going to go through all that. I'll just, first of all, Germany obviously dominated classical music. There's Bach, Beethoven, Franz Schubert, Joseph Haydn, Mozart, Handel, Wagner. I mean, classical music really is largely came out of Germany and Austria. I sort of think of them as together. Okay, Beethoven's quotes. He lived from 1770 to 1827. He said, Handel is the greatest composer who ever lived. Okay, so Handel was incredible. He sort of felt Handel was the only one who was above me. Okay, then he said of Bach, Bach is the immortal god of harmony. All right, then there was one prince who was giving him a hard time. He's in a little bit of an argument with the prince, and he said, what you are by an accident of birth. What I am, I have made myself. There are 1,000 princes, but there is only one Beethoven. He was very arrogant. One time he was walking with Goethe. So Goethe is like the most famous writer, like the Shakespeare of Germany, who ever lived in Germany. And some people noticed them and kind of like looked at them as the two local celebrities. And Goethe said something like, oh, what are all these people looking at us? Isn't that annoying? Or something like that. And Beethoven said, why do you care? They're looking at me. They're not looking at you. So Beethoven was very stuck up. But I think that's normal for a creative person, who, especially one who's an innovator. You have to be stuck up because there's always people trying to knock you down. Whenever you innovate and try to make things better, there's a lot of people who sort of feel comfort or prestige or something in the hierarchy, the tradition. And so they get pissed off at you. It's weird, but it is true. Okay, Beethoven continues. An artist is someone who has learned to trust himself. Yeah, like the typical way an artist learns is they copy the great masters in whatever their field is, and then they start to add their own touch to it, and that comes later. So they have to trust themselves and be able to go with it. Beethoven continues, music is the language of God. We musicians are as close to God as man can be. We hear his voice. We read his lips. We give birth to the children of God who sing his praise. Okay, so that's kind of funny because it's another example of whatever somebody does, they always think that's the most important thing. Like the poet, Percy Bysshe Shelley, the English poet. He thought poets should rule the world. So people, that's normal. People think their own thing is the most important thing. Beethoven continues, don't only practice your art, but force your way into its secrets, for it and knowledge can raise men to the divine. Yeah, and I think that's kind of what you're sort of saying there is don't just practice your art. In a sense, what that reminds me in medicine is, in conventional medicine, to pass your boards, all you got to do is study the conventional textbooks. And you study the conventional textbooks, you practice the standard of care, you can make a lot of money, you won't get in trouble as long as you're doing that, everything is good. But you're going to be sad because none of your patients get better. So if you want, for most stuff, most internal medicine, chronic disease stuff, the most common stuff. So basically, if you want to figure out how to do that, then you have to take all this extra work upon yourself, on your shoulders. But that's where a lot of the reward comes from. So there's always that catch. And most people, it's just not worth it. And they're not even aware of it. They're not even aware that vegan diet exists and all this epidemiology and stuff. They're exhausted. I know tons of doctors. Most of them never read another medical book once they're done with passing their residency boards. They're done, or fellowship boards. That's it. And they got reason for that. They've put off, getting married, having children for, a decade or more. And so now it's time to hurry up and do that before it's too late, before the. Okay, Beethoven's next quote. From the glow of enthusiasm, I let the melody escape. I pursue it. Breathless, I catch up with it. It flies again. It disappears. It plunges into a chaos of emotions. I catch it again. I seize it. I embrace it with delight. I multiply it by modulations, and at last I triumph in the first scene. There is the whole symphony. Okay, and his Ode to Joy, is considered the greatest symphony ever written. It's magnificent. Okay, especially the fourth movement. All right, here's a quote now by Jack Benny, the comedian. He was asked, how old are you? And he said, I'm 39. He would always say he's 39. And that's funny to me because my mother used to do that. When I was a kid, I was young. I didn't really understand what was going on. But my mom would always say she's 39. And I didn't get the joke until a couple years later. I'm like, Ma, you always say you're 39. You can't still be 39. And that I was, 4 years old when last time you said you were 39. And how could you still be, that was a joke. It took us years to understand that joke. Okay, Brendan Behan. Okay, there's no such thing as bad publicity except your own obituary. I was convicted in my absence and sentenced in my absence so they can shoot me in my absence. The big difference between sex and money is sex for free and sex for money. When it's for money, it usually costs a lot less. Okay, Michael Behe, he's a biochemist. He's a guy who wrote a lot of stuff about evolutionary theory, and he's a believer in intelligent design. I believe in intelligent design too, after extensive study of evolutionary biology. People say, oh, you're stupid if you believe in intelligent design. No, if you really know what's going on and you've really studied it, you'll believe in intelligent design. Because it's way too complex to explain the blood clotting system, the immune system, the brain, the eye, and a whole bunch of other things. So here's some quotes by Behe. There is no publication in the scientific literature, in the prestigious journals, specialty journals, or books that describes how molecular evolution of any real complex biochemical system either did occur or even might have occurred. The assertion of Darwinian molecular evolution is merely bluster. Irreducible complexity is a problem for Darwinian evolution. Whenever we see these complex functional systems, we realize that they have to be designed. The scientific literature has no answers to the question of the origin of the immune system. And he's correct, okay? Because people try to bully you into thinking that Darwinism is really science. And don't get me wrong, there's a lot of useful stuff in Darwinism, and neo-Darwinism. But it just doesn't go past the family level. It can't explain things at a bigger level. That's where you get that nonsense about punctuated equilibrium, because they can't explain it. Okay, Jordan Belfort, he was I think he was the Wolf on Wall Street, this real slick salesman guy. He said, in order to buy, the customer must like you. They must like the product. They must like the company. To buy, the buyer must have certainty. So some people are just really good salespeople. A lot of times they're good looking. They have this compelling presence. It's not easy to have, and some people just got it. But you can become a good salesman even if you're not that good looking. That guy, what's his name? I like Kiyosaki. Kiyosaki wrote a lot about being a salesperson. Clive Bell, he says, art and religion are the two roads by which men escape from the circumstances to ecstasy. So yeah, a lot of people have said things along those lines is, you're stuck doing some mundane, boring job that pays the bill, gives you money. And you need the money to, pay your mortgage and buy your food. But you'd like to do something creative and better. But the only problem is that creative and better stuff usually doesn't pay you anything. So that's kind of the spot a lot of people find themselves in. But it's still quite enjoyable. Okay, Francis Bellamy quote. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Yeah, I used to have to say that all the time when I was a kid. Nowadays, almost nobody ever says it. But when I was young, we used to say that. We used to also say, e pluribus unum, out of many one, the melting pot, the idea of we're all to become the same, Americans, rather than sort of modern version is you're supposed to, be your hyphenated whatever ethnic group. USA was better in the past. The 1980s was the best decade. Wealth, prosperity, ability to talk openly. Oh, we had so much fun back in the 1980s. Okay, that's it for today. Hope that was interesting. And